people are on this campus from a wide range of financial backgrounds, and this is not a rich kid school in the way that, you know, some other schools are a little bit more like that, and that you have to be pretty sensitive to what the needs of different families and different students are on campus and figure out a way to work with that. I've been working hard to try to put together, to try being entrepreneurial on this campus in a way that puts together resources that actually gets us and gives us some money that we can invest, that we can use to spend on some new programs. And the result of that, in part, that I'm really proud of is some of the investments we're making in affordability, which we could not have done without some of these other efforts. So 2 years ago, I announced something that we call Badger Promise, which is aimed at first-generation students who transfer. And as I'm sure many of you know, there are a lot of first-gen students who stay at home, go to two-year schools. But at the end of those 2 years have done well, and you really want to bring them into UW-Madison, and we have transfer agreements with all of the two-year schools pretty much around Wisconsin that says if you go to those schools, if you take at least a certain set of courses and have a certain grade point average, you're automatically admitted to UW-Madison. So what Badger Promise said is that if you're a first-gen student coming to us from a transfer in a Wisconsin school, we will promise you either 1 or 2 years of fully paid scholarships to cover all of your tuition and fees, depending on what your family income is, right? That was 2 years ago that we implemented that. And then last year we were in a position to do something much broader, which is aimed at all low-income students in Wisconsin, that we're calling Bucky's Tuition Promise. And this is the first year we're implementing that. And that is a commitment that if you are admitted to the University of Wisconsin and you come from a family in the bottom half of the income distribution, this year that's someone whose family income is $56,000 or below, we will guarantee while you are here that you will have a scholarship package at a minimum that for the next 4 years will cover all of your tuition and fees. We will make sure that, whatever you're able to put, we will top it up so that for 4 years you will be covered for tuition and fees. And of course, there's some students from very low income families who will get more than just tuition and fees in terms of scholarship aid. But it's partly what we were trying for was a very simple message that says to families, we're going to make it possible to come to college. And it's not, well, if you apply for this, we'll work with that, and maybe you'll get some money. And just know, we are going to, for 4 years, cover your tuition and fees. And some of you will get more than that, depending upon your income level. And the simplicity of that message, I think, is really important. Our biggest problem with this, as we've taken this out to high schools, is that families and guidance counselors don't believe us. They think there's a catch here, and there's some marketing scheme that we're doing. So, we're trying really hard to get out to guidance counselors in the high schools and community groups, particularly in small and midtown Wisconsin, to say, no, we really need this. And, hopefully word about this, students come here and, indeed see that it's real. We'll circle back to high schools as well. But, that's the sort of thing that I think we absolutely have to be doing. I'm very proud of the fact that we have the resources together to be able to do that. And I would love to extend this a little further up the income distribution, perhaps at a slightly lower level. 2 years if you're between X and Y, and whatever. The income data for Wisconsin just came out, and it now says that the median income in Wisconsin actually jumped more than it has in many, many years. It went from 56 to almost 58, and we will adapt our eligibility for Bucky's Tuition Promise to the income numbers as they go up over time. But whether we can extend it further is just going to depend on how successful are we at generating additional resources. And some of this is, some piece of this is a campaign we've been running with our alumni. I know you see the sign saying always forward around campus. We have generated over the last 5 years during this campaign 3,400 new scholarships. And that includes graduate students, undergraduates, athletic scholarships, it's the whole range, but a substantial amount of additional scholarship money simply coming from our alumni and our friends, and that makes a big difference. So that together with some other money that we're putting in, we have really expanded the scholarship aid that we have available out of our own resources, which historically Wisconsin hasn't done very much of that they've relied purely on federal and state dollars, which have not expanded in the last 10 years. So, it's something that I'm really pleased with what we've been able to do. There's more that we need to do as we put the money together. financial aid coverage for lower income students is number one, and in Wisconsin, because that's where we most owe students access to the university. And I've said this, my goal is that anyone who can be admitted to the university here in Madison should not be stopped from coming simply because of affordability, right? And I should note that, as you all know, covering tuition and fees is a substantial amount, but it's hardly been charged with by a few people trying to give away, free college, and this is a social scheme or something. And I sort of say, look, we're covering tuition and fees, but people still have to cover all of their living expenses, and that's actually probably $14,000, $15,000 a year for most students. It's more than tuition and fees, and that's a pretty high hurdle for if you're looking at earnings and work study, and you still ends up with some students taking out loans. I mean, I do not have a problem with students taking some loans, given the returns you get from college. Taking out a loan is not a bad thing. Just like taking out a loan for a new house is not a bad thing. Taking out a loan for a car is not a bad thing. If you're investing something that's going to give you returns, but what's bad is if you end up with loans that you can't repay, right? And that are way too high. As I think some of you may know, over half of our students leave this university, our undergraduates, with no loans whatsoever. That is far above the national average, where it's about a third. And of those who do take out loans, our default rate among Wisconsin students is like 1.5%. At the national level, it's over 11%. And what that says is those who are taking loans are getting into jobs which allow them to fully repay those loans, that there's not, that the investment is paying off, right? They're not having problems with. So, those are the sort of numbers I want to continue. Now, I always worry because there are always a few students who do the wrong thing and end up with large amounts of excess loans, and we're doing what we can in terms of advising and counseling to try to stop the very small number of students to do that from, to understand this isn't a good idea. But, I really focusing on how do you make college affordable, how do you reduce the cost that people have to pay out of pocket, and then for the money that they still have to, and I don't believe in fully free college. I think you've got to have some skin in the game here, because you want people to understand they're investing in something important, and you also want to give them incentives to finish in 4 years, right? For those who are working, for those who do have to take out some loans, to make sure we're giving the right sort of counseling, and that the amounts that they do have to raise are affordable, and you don't end up working 40 hours a week with full course load, which can be pretty deadly for students. When we hear that a student is in a difficult housing situation or has become homeless because of the inability to pay bills, I know that our student service groups try to become immediately involved and find a place for that student to live and to work with them on their financial package and what they need. And I've talked with our folks about this, and their reaction is when we hear that there is a student who is at risk or is homeless, we act immediately, and for obvious reasons. So I do think we respond as quickly as we can. Now, I will also say I've heard from individuals who say, look, I was just too embarrassed, I didn't want to tell anyone, I didn't want to talk about this. And that creates, I guess I understand that, but that does create a difficult dynamic because we can't help people who we don't know about. I had a staff member who's worked here at one point who's described the experience that individual had as a student when he became homeless for a while and said, I just didn't tell anyone, I didn't dare, I would hide it. That makes it hard to help. I would like to believe there are very few homeless students, and I must say we hear about that very rarely. We try to help immediately when that happens. Food insecurity is a harder thing to measure. There are ways to measure this. There have been surveys on this campus and others. It's not something that we do on a month-to-month basis. But again, if our student aid office hears about students who are in some pretty severe financial problems, they will try to work with them. Now, I also will say you occasionally get students for whom there's not a good answer that, for whatever set of reasons, there seem to be resources, but they aren't working well, and There are situations where you can help more than others. But as you know, there's a pantry that opened on campus, and it's now been probably last winter that I last had a conversation with people running that pantry. I was trying to find out from them how many people accessed the pantry and who they were, and were they undergraduates or graduate students, and the pantry itself didn't have great data on that, because I was hoping that we could work with them in some way to try to identify populations that were more at risk. But we're always looking for good ideas of ways in which we can be involved if there are problems that need to be fixed.